Hey, what's up guys? It's Roy here. So today's video, let's go and build some different Macs. So let's do some iMacs, let's do some MacBook Pros. All of them are gonna have the new M3 chip or higher. But I thought I would do this video to help as a buying guide, maybe depending on what you're using it for, throw out some different recommendations as far as like configurations, and then maybe even throw out some alternative ideas instead of going with these. So let's start with the iMac, which is the newest thing that finally got updated. So now it does have the M3 processor, which is a much needed upgrade since it's always had the M1. But with these, we didn't get anything else that's different other than just the chip. So it's still the same 4.5K Retina display. It's still the exact same 24-inch display. All the colors are the same. You're getting the same Magic Keyboard, the same Magic Mouse with the Lightning. So they didn't even update that, which I think is crazy. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it, except for, like I said, it has the M3 now. So if we go to the order now option and kind of scroll down, you can see that we have three different ones here. So it starts at $12.99. So just right off the bat, guys, if you are someone who doesn't have anything, so no keyboard, no mouse, no monitor, nothing, this is definitely a good buy because you get everything. It just really is up to you if a 24-inch monitor is big enough. Now, there was talk about a Pro version coming out with a 27 or 32-inch monitor. That didn't happen, so maybe we'll get that next year or the following year, but this is what you're stuck with right now. But with any of these, they all have 8 cores of CPU. So it's an 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU for the base, but if you jump up $200, you're getting a 10-core GPU, but you get some extras as well. But it all starts with 256 gigs of SSD storage, except for the high-end one. And then they all start with 8 gigs of unified memory. So that is, I don't know. I can tell you right now, 8 gigs of unified memory is going to be plenty for probably 80 to 90% of the people that buy this, but it really boils down to what you're going to use it for. If you're going to do photo editing or video editing, if you're going to do 4K editing, then maybe you want to bump up your, RAM. So let's go in and select this base model here. And let's play around with it here. So as you can see, we are at $12.99 with 8 gigs of unified memory. If we spend the extra $200, we're jumping up to 16 gigs. And to be honest with you, this is probably where I would stop. I wouldn't spend any extra on storage because if you see here, it's going to cost you $200 just to jump up to 512, and then another $400 from the start, so 400 total, just to get to 1 terabyte. And that's pretty crazy when you can go buy an external SSD that's plenty fast, has more than probably just 1 terabyte, and spend way less than the $400 to get to 1 terabyte. You do have some other options if you want to spend another $30 for a gigabit Ethernet. That's up to you if you have access to plugging it into an Ethernet cable. And then the base model does have just the standard Magic Keyboard. If you want to bump up, you can spend the extra $50 and get the one with Touch ID. Or if you do get that middle level one at $14.99 without the 16 gigs, that automatically comes with it. And it also comes with the gigabit Ethernet port. So once again, is it worth that $200-300 bumps as you start to get into it? But I personally think for most people, depending on what you're using this for, if you're only going to be using it for emails and for web browsing and some light stuff, then you don't need to jump up to 16 gigs. The 8's plenty. 8's going to be plenty fine for you. But if you plan on eventually using like Lightroom and Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve or anything like that, 16 gigs is highly recommended because they're soldered together, guys. You can't upgrade it later. So you might as well take advantage of it and do that. So that's my recommendation. Now, my alternative recommendation is depending on what you have already. If you already have a keyboard and a monitor, then I just say get a Mac Mini still. Mac Minis are awesome. They are a big bang for your buck. I mean, right now at Best Buy, they're $4.99 for the base. And the base model actually has not only the same 8-core CPU, it also has 10-core GPU. So you don't have to pay extra to get the 10-core GPU on the Mac Mini. It just comes with it already. And I've done plenty of stress tests and video editing tests with the Mac Mini, and it passes with flying colors. So I think if you already have the stuff, just get the Mac Mini. But if you don't, then you still are going to come out cheaper, because if you spend $500 on the Mac Mini, let's say 300 on the high end for a monitor, so now that's putting us at 800, and then you spend say $200 more for your keyboard and mouse, well, that's $1,100, or no, that's $1,000 plus taxes, and you're coming out $300 cheaper than what this one is. So it just really boils down to what you want. But I will say, if you even consider jumping up to the high-end iMac, so like speccing it all out, so say for example, if we went back and we went to the highest one that we can do at $1699, and let's say I jumped it to 16 gigs, and then we're already at 512, well, I'm at $1899, so I'm at $1,900. I would just buy the M2 Pro Mac Mini and still do all those other things that I was saying, because you can buy a used Mac Mini M2 Pro for like maybe $900 to $1,000, maybe a little bit cheaper, just depends on where you're finding it. And then add the extra, say $500 for all the other stuff. I mean, you're at $1,500 all in plus taxes, and yeah, you're coming in $400 cheaper. So I think that's definitely worth it too. So just like I said, it boils down to if you already have the extras. So now let's go ahead and jump into the MacBook Pros. So the MacBook Pros are a little bit different beasts than the previous ones, because now there's this addition to allowing the base M3 chip to be in these. And I'm curious if anyone else kind of maybe got tricked into thinking that the M3 Pro version dropped down to $1599, because I can tell you I was one of those. I was doing some double duty. I was watching the World Series, and I was also watching the event on my laptop in my living room. And when I heard them say that, I was like, holy crap, $400 off? That's ridiculous. So I went on immediately and I was like, I'm about to pre-order it. But then I quickly realized, no, it's just the entry-level M3 chip, which might be plenty for most people. But if this is a pro laptop, I don't know if it's worth just considering doing that. I would think if you're going to do it, spend the money and get the Pro version, which M3 Pro or M3 Max. But if we go to the order now, let's focus on the M3 one real quick, just to kind of show you some different configurations. So it's only the 14-inch model, and you're only getting space gray and silver. There is no space black with the base. So if you want the space black, you got to bump up to the big boys. But it is 8-core CPU and 10-core GPUs, but they both have 8 gigs of unified memory. One's 512 SSD, one's 1 terabyte of SSD. But if you notice here, you're at $1599 and $1799. But once again, that is with only 8 gigs of RAM. Now, one thing to point out is you do lose one Thunderbolt port, and you also lose a fan inside. So instead of 2, you get 1. Might not make a big difference, to be honest with you. But everything else is almost the same. It's the same screen, it's the same speakers, same trackpad, keyboard, all that. Not a whole lot that changed. So let's go ahead and go into the base one here. And once again, depending on what you're going to be using this for, it might make sense to spend the extra $200 and get 16 gigs of RAM. So now you're at $1799, which then kind of throws this weird kink in the chain of, should you just spend another $200 and get the M3 Pro version and get everything out of it? Get the faster, chip, get the better video codecs, get all those great things for the Pro version, and get it for $200 more. And then get the space black color if you want the space black color. The only other thing you might consider is spending the extra $20 to getting the 96 watt USB-C power adapter versus a 70 watt. To be honest with you, I mean, it's $20, so that might not be a terrible investment. So you're at $18.19 now, and that's expensive. So let's go ahead and go back in to the configuration options here, and we'll do order now again. And let's look at the M3 Pro. I think this is going to be the one that most people look at. So if you notice here at the M3 Pro level, we're at $19.99 for the base. That's 11 core CPU and 14 core GPU and 18 gigs of unified memory. And of course it starts at 512 gigs of SSD storage, or you can jump up to the $23.99 version, which is a pretty big hike. That's $400 more, but you're getting 12 core CPU, 18 core GPU, and 1 terabyte of SSD storage, but you're also getting the 96 watt adapter with that one. But that's up to you. But if you notice, we lose space gray and we only get space black or silver. Totally go with space black if I were y'all. They do say there's this like anodized coating on the exterior, not on the interior, but exterior, to maybe help with fingerprints and smudges. To be determined if that actually works. And then if we do the 16-inch, you're going to notice here, guys, that it starts at $24.99. So instead of $2,000, it's $2,500 basically. And you're getting a 12-core CPU, 18-core GPU, and a 16-inch monitor, bigger battery, 140 watt adapter. So just all in all, just a bigger, badder computer. And then you can jump up to 36 gigs if you wanted to. That's as high as you can go on the M3 Pro version. And you can go all the way up to $3,500 if you do 36 gigs of unified memory, but then that gives you 30 core GPU and a 14 core CPU and 1 terabyte. But let's play around with the 14-inch, because I think the 14-inch is going to be the sweet spot for most people, because I just feel like it's a small, compact laptop. It's plenty fast, but it's just up to you. Now you can spend the extra money and get more CPU and GPU cores. I don't know if it's worth that or not, especially with previous testing, even on the M1 Pros, or even like the Max chips. There wasn't a significant, if any, improvement in performance. And then if you notice here, I only have the option for 36 gigs, like I said, but if I just stuck with the base and I just jumped up from 18 to 36, now I'm at $2,400, but I've maxed out my memory. That might be worth it once again, depending on what you're using it for. And then as you can see here, we can add the extra storage, but I'm gonna just say universally, guys, if you're going to upgrade anything, upgrade your memory and call it a day, because you can get inexpensive external SSD storage. But in this particular case, it's a $400 bump instead of a $200 bump like you are doing with like the iMac from 8 to 16. So from 18 to 36, it's $400 more. So that's also something you need to think about. But I mean, just depending on what you're using it for, I would just say stick with the base. I think the base model is going to be plenty for pretty much most people, except for if you're doing like 3D rendering or any of this extra stuff. But like for me on my base M1 Pro here, I literally haven't been able to freeze it up or screw it up using, 10-bit 422 A6700 footage here. So 4K footage, doing, color grading and adding effects and audio and all these things. It hasn't skipped a beat, and it's the base model. This is only the 512 gig version. So I think the base is going to be plenty fine for y'all. And even if you looked at the 16-inch and did the base, I once again think the base is plenty, because looking at this, I don't think it's worth spending any extra money to upgrade your memory another $400 and taking you, from $2,500 to $2,900. Because then if you're going to do that, you might as well jump up to the Max. So Apple is really smart about how they do these upgrade prices, because it's like, man, for an extra few $100, now you can get a way faster chip, which the M3 Max is definitely worth it if you need it. But once again, like it says here, you got to select the M3 Max with 30 core GPU and add 96 gigs of memory, or you can select the M3 Max with 40 cores to get all the way up to the 128 gigs of storage. So if you're going to get the M3 Pro, I think it's worth just sticking with the base. I don't think you need to add anything extra. You got the 18 gigs of RAM. I think that's plenty. 512 gigs of storage is plenty for most. And once again, buy an external storage. I don't think you need to jump up anymore. But let's look at some alternatives. So one alternative, well, to be honest with you, if you already have, like even for me, like an M1 Pro, I don't think I need the M3 Pro. If anything, I just want it because of the space black color, but I can always add a skin. But I think find an M2 Pro, honestly, because I think there is hardly any major difference in performance because they kept on comparing it to the M1 Pros. And I think there's a reason. I don't think it's a big enough bump for them to really showcase that on their keynote. So if they're not even talking about the M2 Pro and comparing it, it's probably because it's almost the same. And you're going to be able to start finding, especially with Black Friday around the corner, some pretty good deals, I bet, on M2 Pros. So yeah, or used ones. Like right now, even like on itsworthmore.com, I've been finding, heck, M1 Max laptops for like $1,500 and M2 Pros for $1,500 to $1,700. So it might be worth doing that and going the refurbished route, but that's up to you. Now, last but not least, let's look at the big boy and let's check out the M3 Max. So if we go to the M3 Max, we are starting at $31.99 in price for the 14-inch, and for the 16-inch, we're starting at $34.99 in price. But let's look at what we get for the base 14-inch. So with the base 14-inch, we're getting a base storage of 1 terabyte. So I like that. So there's no more 512 option there. We're getting 36 gigs of unified memory. So instead of 32 like we previously got, now we're getting 36. We're getting 14 core CPU and a 30 core GPU. So big bumps there all around. So just right off the bat, if you are looking into getting the Max chip, I mean, guys, what a machine. This is nuts. It's super fast. Heck, I was even seeing some benchmark scores where it's performing as the same as like the M2 Ultra chip. And that's just crazy. That in a laptop, this is nuts. But as you can see here, we can do some different configurations. Once again, if you add the $300 more, you're going to be able to do so. But as you see, you're capped out at 36, but there is no option to jump up to 48 or 64. You're only able to jump to 96 gigs. And now you're looking at $4,000, which is a lot of money, guys. And then of course you can jump up in storage and all that. And yeah, you don't need to do all that. So what I would recommend is if you're looking at a Max, I once again would just say stick with the base. I mean, if you spend the extra $300, you're jumping up to 48 gigs, but it's not just really 400. I mean, it is, I guess, because yeah, if you're looking at it, it jumps to $36.99, but you are going from 36 to 48 gigs of unified memory, and you're getting more cores for the CPU and GPU, but then you have the option of doing 64 or 128 gigs. So just for fun, let's spec this bad boy out. So let's say we jumped up to 128 gigs, and let's say we jumped up to 8 terabytes. That's just nuts. Is that everything we can do? Yeah. $7,000, almost $6,900. That's a lot of money, guys. Don't do that. Please don't do that. I mean, if anything, if you want the 128 gigs of unified memory, which is way more than you would ever need, do it, and you're at $4,700, because I would just say stick with the 1 terabyte once again. But now I got to play devil's advocate here again, because is it worth buying an M3 Max? So what's the alternative out there to the M3 Max? Well, the alternative is an M2 Max, but also an alternative is a M1 Max, because in reality, guys, most YouTubers, even for me, I had an M1 Max and I could never get it to break a sweat. And I threw a lot of stuff at it. And that's why I have an M1 Pro now again, because it just didn't make sense for me to have the M1 Max. Now I do want it back, kind of, but the M1 Pro is plenty for me. And if you're looking at a Max, then, I mean, there's plenty of refurbished options out there for an M1 and it's going to be cheaper. Like I said, like right now I can go to itsworthmore.com, buy one that's in like good or excellent condition, 16 inches even, and probably be at like $2,100. And that is $1,000+ less than what these are. But once again, it just really boils down to what you're using it for. Now, if you have the money or you have an old one and you're trading it in and they're giving you a really good trade-in value, then yeah, I mean, go for the M3 Max, because if you don't have one at all, I mean, it might be worth it, but if you already have an M1 Max, I don't even recommend doing it. But if you're going to upgrade anything, I would say just get the M2 Max, because you're getting a better technically computer than the M1 Max. So you're getting like the better HDMI, you're getting, you know, just all around a little bit of a spec bump all around. So it might just be worth it, because like I said, with the M2 Pro, there's going to be some Black Friday deals. There's going to be some better deals that you can take advantage of, and it might just be worth considering that. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to say, guys. So let's just recap. So for the iMac, if you're looking at the iMac, probably stick with the base model, but bump up to 16 gigs depending on what you're using it for. Or alternatively, buy a keyboard, a mouse, a screen by itself, buy an M2 Mac Mini or an M2 Pro Mac Mini, and have a, technically, in my opinion, probably a better setup. But once again, that's up to you. And then when it comes to the MacBooks, for the MacBook Pros, if you're looking at the M3, then you know, you're probably just wanting something that's a little bit nicer than a MacBook Air, and a little bit nicer or way nicer than the 13-inch MacBook Pros with the touch bars and all that. So I think far as recommendations once again go, base models all around for the MacBook Pros, because you're getting the 16 gigs, at least on the M3 Pro and M3 Max. Well, not 16 gigs there, but for the M3, I think it is worth jumping up to the 16 gig model. But then, like I said, it starts to kind of blur that line if you should upgrade to the M3 Pro instead and just get a better computer all around. So once again, guys, totally up to you, but those are my recommendations. Ultimately, I think in the scheme of things, I'm someone who just likes to buy used and really not wanting to upgrade if necessary. If it's not necessary, I should say, excuse me. And I think you're going to find a way better deal on an M2 Pro or an M2 Max. And then I think you're going to find a better deal on a Mac Mini M2 or M2 Pro as well. So I guess the kind of ending statement is, yes, these are going to be awesome machines, but if you're wanting to save some money, just stick with M2, or at least get an M2 if you don't have one already. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully that helped you. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Have I missed anything? So please hit that like button if you liked the video. If you loved it, please subscribe. Ring that notification bell for up-to-date content. So be safe. God bless. I'll see you on the next one.